But yeah, these aren't good. These aren't good. But I read all 4. Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the long-awaited paranormal romance recommendations video. This is probably my most requested video and I've been putting off making it because I feel like I don't have very unique recommendations. I feel like you're all gonna know all of the books I'm gonna talk about already. So if I happen to mention something new to you, or if you find a book that you haven't heard of before, please let me know down in the comments because it'll make me feel better. I've kind of split this into 2 parts. I have my serious recommendations, like these are quality, really good books, highly recommend, and then my trash recommendations, like proceed at your own risk. Like, don't come crying to me if they're really bad. I'm warning you now. I read these in like high school and I liked them at the time, but they probably don't stand up. So read them if you want to, but I'm not condoning anything. This is also the 3rd video in my fall recommendation series, so I'll link the playlist down below in the description if you missed my previous recommendation videos. The first one was spooky thrillers and then the second one was like dark, scary, creepy books. So today we're doing the paranormal romance, an all-time favorite of mine, and I know for you guys as well. Should we start with the good recommendations or the trashy recommendations? Let's start with the trashy recommendations because I'm not going to get super into them. I'm just going to kind of put them on your radar, and I can put a timestamp down below in the description if you want to skip to the good recommendations, but I thought we would include the trashy ones in here just for fun. Sometimes you're in the mood for a trashy book, okay? I'm not judging you. I read all of these, so at one point I enjoyed them. I also think the trashy ones are more well-known, like these are the more popular ones, so you'll probably know what a lot of these ones are. So first we have Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is basically sexy aliens and it's identical to Twilight but with aliens. I never finished the series. I think I read the first 4 books in the series in like 3 days. I binge read the heck out of these in high school or whenever I read these. These are utter trash but so addicting too. I was like in a cave while I was reading them and then I emerged and realized how bad they were, but while I was in the thick of it I didn't really quite know. But when I say this is exactly Twilight, I really mean like this girl moves to this town, there's a family of aliens, it's a romance with the hot guy, like Twilight but hot aliens. Read at your own risk. This next one I think is obvious, but I felt like it would be cruel not to include it. It's Immortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. Trashy, long series, big commitment. If you end up liking it, you have a ton of books to read. I like the prequel trilogy, The Infernal Devices, more than the original series, but when I was 16, I was all about these books. We're not going to dwell on this one. This one is, I think, a little less known because it's an older series, so this might be a newer recommendation for you. And that is the Unearthly trilogy by Cynthia Hand. Half angel, half human girl moves to a small town in Wyoming. It's set in high school. Got a love triangle with hot angel boys. One of them's like a cowboy. This one is more wholesome, I think, than the other trashy ones. I actually genuinely really enjoyed this at the time. This one is cutesy, very clean from what I remember. But yeah, our main character is part angel and she's having visions about like how someone's gonna die and she's trying to stop it while also falling in love with 2 boys, one of whom is an angel and one of them's just a human. But yeah, a cute trilogy, would recommend this one actually. It's not quite in my good recommendations, but this one's on like the top of the trashy recommendations. Next we have Hex Hall by Rachel Hawkins. This is also the first book in a trilogy. This is set at a magical school for all of these supernatural creatures and our main character is a witch. I didn't love this one. I think I read this one a little bit too late, so if you're younger I think you might enjoy this one more, or if you just enjoy younger reading books. I do enjoy Rachel Hawkins' writing style, but again, we're not going to dwell on this one. The next one is Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick. This is about as trashy as it gets. Also very Twilight-esque, but with fallen angels and with a bad boy love interest named Patch, because apparently the name Patch is real sexy. Oh, but at the time, 16-year-old me was all for it. This is a 4-book series. I could not tell you a damn thing about this anymore, except that this is literally Twilight. Like, they meet in bio class and everything, I'm pretty sure. But if you want a trashy read, this will 100% fit the bill. I had to throw this next one in for laughs, like I just had to. Fallen by Lauren Kate, another fallen angel book. Don't you just miss like early, when was this? Like 2012, when all of the paranormal romances were coming out in YA? When it was all vampires and fallen angels and stuff? And werewolves, you can't forget the werewolves. This one was adapted into a movie. Did you guys know that? There's a movie. If you've read this book, you have to go watch the movie. It was actually like a decent adaptation. Considering it's a bad book, the movie's not good, but it's a good adaptation of the book. The one thing this book does have going for it is I really like this setting. It's set at this boarding school and it feels very gothic and atmospheric, especially the movie. The movie does a good job with this as well. And this one deals with reincarnation. Basically, our main character and her hot fallen angel boyfriend have been falling in love with each other throughout the centuries, but she always dies and then it starts over again. Real trashy series. If you're gonna read this, I would recommend reading it on audiobook. It makes it a little more tolerable. But yeah, these aren't good. These aren't good. But I read all 4. The first book is the hardest to get through, I think. I'm really recommending the audiobook. It makes it a lot easier. And then these next 2 are sort of borderline in between the 2 categories. Like, they're kind of trashy, but I would still pretty like seriously recommend them. And the first one is Nightshade by Andrea Kramer. This is a werewolf book, and this is the first book in the series, but I actually never finished the series. But I remember really enjoying this one when I read it in high school. I was like homesick from school one day and I read it all in one day, and it's kind of cool because it's told in like phases of the moon. And this one is also a love triangle between our main character, her sexy pack leader, and a human boy. If anyone has read the entire series, let me know how it was, because now I'm kind of curious. Even though I was never much of a werewolf girl, let me know. Back in the day, what was your paranormal preference? Were you more into vampires? Were you the fallen angels? Were you the werewolves? I know there was some like weird shit too. We had like the fairy phase, there was some mermaid books and stuff in there. Which was your preference? I could never get into the mermaids. It took a rare fairy book to hook me. I didn't like them for the most part. I think I was more partial to the vampires and the occasional fallen angel. There was something about werewolves when I was young that just felt like dirty. I don't know why. That's like the word that pops into my head. And then my last like borderline one before we get into the good recommendations is Beautiful Creatures by Margaret Stoll and Cami Garcia. I actually really liked this first book in the series. It's a 4-book series. I think the series really goes downhill, so stop after the first book and don't watch the movie. The movie was not good. But this book has actually a lot of good things going for it. For one thing, it's really long and slow paced, so go into it with patience. But this book is set in a small southern town, and so the setting is a really strong aspect of this book. And our main character is a witch, and when she comes of age, she's either going to be like taken to the light or the dark. She's going to be a good witch or a bad witch basically, and she's falling in love with a human boy in this small town. Yeah, the book is a lot better than the movie. It's actually really complex and it has some really interesting subplots in there. Different kinds of magic, like we kind of explore voodoo a little bit, and the world building in here is actually really well done. Like the sense of place in here, like this feels like a small town that I want to go visit. So there's a lot of good things about this book. It is slower paced and the series isn't great as a whole, but I would read more books set in this world for sure. Okay, now we get on to my serious recommendations. Some of these are still pretty trashy, but I think these ones hold up more. So first we have The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa. This is the first book in a trilogy, and as you could probably assume, vampire book, and also kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian-esque. So we're following our main character, Allie. She's a human trying to survive in a world that's basically taken over by vampires, especially big cities, and they take humans on as like personal feeder bag pets. Allie absolutely hates vampires, which you know means she's gonna turn into one in the first freaking chapter and then have to figure out how to survive while also falling in love with a human boy, and she doesn't really know how to control her animalistic urges just yet. Really fun series, way better than the cover makes it look. Would highly recommend the audiobooks for this one. The series is so underrated, you guys don't even understand. I genuinely love this series. This is another one that I would definitely reread. And then this next one I was hesitant to include in here because I don't really know if it counts as paranormal romance, but I love it so much that we're gonna talk about it. It definitely goes with like the fall Halloween vibes at least. Can you guess? Do you know? The Unbecoming of Dyer. This is one of my all-time favorite series, and this is sort of like a psychological paranormal book. Our main character Mara was in an accident with all of her best friends, and she's the only survivor, and she's suffering from PTSD. She moves to this new town where she meets a mysterious bad boy, Noah Shaw, who has a British accent and is really freaking hot. And Mara is basically hallucinating, and we don't really know if something kind of weird and paranormal is going on or if it's all in her head. And Noah himself has some weird paranormal things going on with him as well. I love this book. You guys are probably so sick of hearing me talk about it. This is one of my all-time favorite books. I recommend it all the time. It's definitely not for everyone. Some people hate this book. I've made my peace with that. At least give it a try. Highly recommend. This next one I also don't know if it's considered paranormal romance, but we're gonna talk about it real quick. And that is Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. It's sort of an origin story for the Queen of Hearts, which I love because I find villains incredibly fascinating, especially villain origin stories, because you start off sympathizing with them and you kind of get to see what goes wrong in their life to lead them down such like a rough path. And it makes the whole thing that much more tragic because there's romance in here that I was all for. This book is really weird, but if you like Alice in Wonderland, I think you will love this, and Alice in Wonderland is one of my favorite books. So this book just did everything right for me. I've heard people say that they hated this book, but this is one of my all-time favorites. I love the setting of Alice in Wonderland with like the cards and the magical kingdom and everything. It is really weird, like there's some really weird things in this book, I'm not gonna lie to you. But if you liked Marissa Meyer's other books and you haven't read this yet, totally recommend. And if you like Alice in Wonderland, I think you'll really enjoy this. It wouldn't be a trashy paranormal romance recommendation video without The Cruel Prince. This is another book that people seem to either love or hate, which honestly, either way you go, totally fair. This is a hate to love romance set in the fairy world. Our main character is Immortal, and she was kidnapped by a fairy when she was very young, and she has since grown up in the fairy world, and all of the fairies hate her because she's human, and so she's basically been bullied by fairies her whole life. And one of those fairies is the prince, and he is a real big douchebag, but stuff happens. You may have heard there's like problematic things in here, especially the relationship. So just know that this isn't like a cutesy hate to love romance where like all is forgiven, it was like a misunderstanding or something. Like, no, these characters genuinely hate each other, and even when they start making out, they still hate each other. Like, it's all like sexual tension. It's not like amicable feelings between each other. So just go in knowing like it's not a healthy relationship, but it's real like steamy and hot and fun to read about. Would recommend the audiobooks for these for sure. I'm really looking forward to the third book in the series, which is coming out next month. So it's the perfect time to start the series if you haven't already. But I personally really enjoyed these books. Next, I'm going to be recommending Vampire Academy and Bloodlines by Richelle Mead. Bloodlines is a spin-off series for Vampire Academy, and I actually think I might like the spin-off series a little bit more than I like Vampire Academy, though I love both of them. This is set in a world with 3 different types of vampires. We have the Moroi, who have like special magical powers, the Dampiers, who are half human and they're the bodyguards, and then the Strigoi are the more like animalistic, primal, vicious vampires that just kill everything. There was a movie adaptation. Don't watch the movie. Don't let the movie ruin the books for you. Read the books. I love our main character, Rose. She's just really snarky and badass and fun to read from. And then in Bloodlines, we're following Sydney, who's very logical and book smart, and watching her character development in this spin-off series is the most satisfying thing to read, as well as her romance, which is really freaking cute. Would highly recommend both of these series. If you're into vampires, for sure, read these. Going off of the vampire recommendations, I have The Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black. This was in another one of my recommendation videos. This one is much darker and I think more mature than the other vampire books. I actually like this more than The Cruel Prince. This is my favorite Holly Black book. Definitely recommend giving this one a try. We're following Tana. She's a teenage girl, and in this world there are cold towns, which are sort of quarantined areas for vampires because vampirism is considered like an infection, and so humans can go into these cold towns, but once they enter they can't come back out because they're considered infected. I love my vampire romances, and this one is a very creepy, spooky, dark, atmospheric kind of gothic feeling book, and I really like the mood that you get reading this. I think that's the strongest aspect of the book. And I also just really liked the idea of the cold towns and sort of how the vampires are like royalty in these towns, and humans go in because they're like so enamored by these vampires despite knowing all of the risks and stuff. It's just a very like dark and sexy book. I'm into it. Highly recommend. I'm rereading it this October. Read it with me if you want to. And then on the like younger, more lighthearted side of the spectrum, I have Paranormal by Kiersten White. I actually just read this for the first time this year. This is the first book in a trilogy, and this book follows Evie, who works for a paranormal containment agency. So basically her job is to go and retrieve paranormal creatures like vampires, werewolves, things like that, and they're tagged and neutralized to protect the general public. And the reason why she works for this containment agency is because she can see supernatural creatures in a way that normal humans can't. This was really cute. This definitely reads on the younger side of YA, like 13 to 14-year-old range, but even so, I still really enjoyed it. It's funny. The main character is very witty. I loved the banter. It's very visual. I don't know why. If you ever watched the Sabrina the Teenage Witch, not the like live action TV show, the cartoon version show, I don't know why this book reminded me of that so much, and I grew up on that show, so I loved this. And then our last recommendation for this video I also almost didn't include because it's not a paranormal romance per se, but it has a sort of similar vibe to it, which is why I'm recommending it. And it's also lesser known, and I just want more people to read this book. And that is Under the Never Sky by Veronica Rossi. This is sort of more of a YA dystopian novel. It's post-apocalyptic, and there are essentially these electric storms that happen, and so the people who live on the outside and are sort of braving these storms are thought of as the savages, and our main character comes from this like protected compound, and so the savages refer to them as the moles. The people inside of this compound are essentially living their lives through like a virtual reality headset kind of thing, and the story is about our main character who gets kicked out into the wild and has to figure out how to survive in the real world after living her whole life in this virtual reality. I love the romance in these books. It's so freaking cute. These books are so underrated. Like, no one I know has read them. You have to read them. I loved these books. It's the first book in a trilogy, if I didn't already say that, and plus the series has really nice looking covers. So yeah, those are all of the paranormal romances that I'm going to be recommending to you today. If you've read any of these, feel free to let me know what you thought of them down below in the comments. I would love to know. Or if you have some other recommendations, please leave those down below in the comments. I'm always looking for more paranormal romances. It's one of my favorite genres to read, and I feel like we're slowly making a comeback and they're starting to get published again, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, if you missed my previous fall recommendation videos, I'll have those linked down below in the description. If you're new here, I would love it if you would subscribe. I put up at least 2 new videos every single week. Follow me on Instagram if you want. All the links are down below in the description, and I will just see you guys in my next video very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you, I feel a connection. With